My name is David Sherrard. I'm with Environmental Management Consulting. We are the comprehensive health and safety provider for the School District of Verona. To date, our goal is to provide training in bloodborne pathogens, hazardous communication. We'll also cover teacher safety issues regarding new developments and ongoing issues in the district. I will also go over the district's website and how to access that information. Our first topic is bloodborne pathogens. The three main viruses driving the bloodborne pathogens program are hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV/AIDS. In today's world, hopefully everybody has heard of HIV and AIDS and all the efforts going into research and evaluation of the virus. But despite all the research and efforts, there is still no known cure or vaccine for AIDS. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. It is the virus which causes AIDS. Breaks down the immune system. There is no cure. Drugs have extended the life and improved the quality of life for those infected with HIV. The pathogen is transmitted via the blood, typically, most prevalently through unprotected sex and IV drug use. There is no documentable cure for HIV, but there is one individual who has experienced a cure. A man with HIV and leukemia received a bone marrow transplant, which involved a stem cell transplant as well, in 2007 as part of his leukemia treatment. The donor apparently was immune to HIV. There are a certain percentage of the population who have this immunity, and this individual was lucky enough to receive a bone marrow transplant from one of these individuals. To date, he has no HIV detected in his body. HBV is hepatitis B. It is an inflammation of the liver. There is no cure or specific treatment for HBV. Many develop antibodies which protect them from further infection. That is why there isn't a vaccine available. The hepatitis virus is very durable and can survive outside of the body for up to a week. As a comparative, 1 milliliter of HIV virus has 10 to 50 virus particles per milliliter of blood. The hepatitis virus has, in the same milliliter of blood, 1 million to 1 billion virus particles per milliliter. The virus lives outside of the body for several days because of the hardiness of this virus, the pure saturation of virus particles in that blood. This is the comparative analysis between HIV and hepatitis B. HIV transmitted through the blood, semen, vaginal secretions, and breast milk. There is a mother-daughter transmission mode, whereas hepatitis transmitted through the blood, semen, vaginal secretions, no mother-daughter transmission mode. In HIV, 10 to 50 virus particles per milliliter of blood, not a very hardy virus, not a pure saturation of the virus within the blood, whereas hepatitis, there's 1 million to 1 billion virus particles per milliliter of blood, just a very hardy virus, where in HIV, because of the durability of the virus or lack thereof, does not survive outside of the body very long, whereas hepatitis can survive a week outside of the body. And because of the saturated blood with the virus, it is easier, about 100 times easier to catch than HIV as compared to HIV. HIV, not a very hardy virus, but there is no vaccine available. Hepatitis, there is a 3-shot series that is available for. A general breakdown of the hepatitis virus, which all hepatitis viruses attack the liver. There's hepatitis A, which is foodborne, typically fecal-oral route associated with that. Hepatitis B and C are bloodborne pathogens. Hepatitis D, E, and G are just non-ABC variations of those other hepatitis virus. The most recent hepatitis form, hepatitis C, 3 to 4 million carriers that don't even realize that they are infected. The disease can incubate for decades. This affects more Americans than AIDS as of 2010. HCV is not related to the other viruses, hepatitis A, hepatitis B. Hepatitis C, like hepatitis B, is a very hardy virus. It approximately infects 4 million nationally and 170 million within the world. 70% of the infections are chronic, meaning long-term permanent damage. And a startling fact, almost a third of all the liver transplants that happen are performed because of hepatitis C. Just as HIV has had some progress in the diagnostic and treatment fields, so has hepatitis C. They've just come out with a new drug that is shown to be effective in 60 to 65% of the persons infected. Previously, their effective rate was about 4%. As we have demonstrated with showing the saturation of hepatitis virus in a small amount of blood, a very small amount of blood can hurt or even kill you. However, the exposure incidents within schools are relatively rare, and all students within the system should have received the hepatitis shot series. An important part of learning about hepatitis B and hepatitis C is learning to recognize the symptoms. The symptoms are flu-like symptoms, typical school-type symptoms, fatigue, muscle pain, muscle joint pain, but there is a unique yellowing of the eyes or skin with regard to inflammation of the liver. Any liver issues result in a yellowing of the eyes and skin. Though we treat all fluids coming out of the body as if they are contaminated with a small amount of blood and that blood has a virus associated with it, should be kept in the back of your head that this is a bloodborne pathogen. There are high virus particles or concentrations of virus particles in blood, serum, wound extricates, with a moderate level in semen, vaginal fluid, or saliva potentially, but there are low, if not undetectable, levels of the virus in urine, feces, sweat, tears, or breast milk. You should also be aware of ways in which hepatitis B cannot be transmitted through sneezing, kissing, breastfeeding, food, water, sharing, eating utensils. Just casual contact is not a viable transmission mode. How do you handle a spill? Most spills of bloodborne pathogens will be handled by the custodial staff. If a peripheral staff member feels the need to help in the cleanup or finds themselves in a situation where they would need to clean up, they should wear protective gloves. Anything over and above glove protection would dictate that a custodian perform the work. Disinfecting is the probably most critical part of the cleanup process. There are quaternary products that are used in the cleanup kits that are on hand in the district, but a 1 to 10 solution with bleach and water mixture is also effective. Universal precautions should always be used in treating any fluid coming out of the body. You should treat everyone as though they're contaminated with everything. Every fluid coming out of the body should be assumed to contain a small portion of blood, and that blood should be assumed to have a pathogen associated with it. If we use these precautions, we will ultimately be protected. The minimum PPE in addressing a bloodborne pathogen issue are gloves. When you find the need to use gloves in addressing any type of a situation, you should assume there's a contamination on the outside of those gloves and take the gloves off in an appropriate manner. You should work the first glove from the outside, rolling it back so the exposure is contained on the interior of the glove. The glove should be rolled inside out ultimately. The first glove should be placed in the hand of the second glove, then work the second glove from the inside out, ensuring that you don't expose your exposed skin to the contamination that is assumed on the exterior of the glove. The glove should be taken off, rolling it inside out, so ultimately you have an inside out glove with no contamination exposed. Once you've put gloves on, whether it be for a chemical cleanup or a bloodborne pathogen issue, you should always wash your face and hands afterward. Disposal containers are available throughout the district. If there are needles or any other sharps, they should be put in a sharps container that is appropriately labeled. If you have a sharps container or there are needles used in your area, you should never try to recap needles. The needles are placed in a sharps container, uncapped. If you feel the need to cap them, you should use this one-hand method to cap the needle without potential risk to the opposite hand. Sharps containers are used for regulated waste, anything that could potentially puncture the skin. Biohazard bags, red or orange, with the appropriate labels, are used for other materials. Our goal in the district is not to create regulated waste. Regulated waste would only go into a container if it has a potential for a blood-to-blood type of contamination. If the standing fluid in a bag is pourable, drippable, flakeable, squeezable, it should be disposed of as hazardous waste or bio waste. Our goal in the district is not to create that bloodborne waste or regulated waste. We use enough absorbent material so there is no standing liquid in any container. Once waste is put into a biohazard bag, it cannot be commingled with other waste. This waste needs to be incinerated and handled appropriately with a proper chain of custody. The 3-shot vaccination for hepatitis is offered at no cost to all of those who are occupationally exposed. It is a 3-shot series, one that is received initially, one a month down the road, another 6 months later. It is effective for as long as they've been measuring it. Once your body develops the antibodies, it will develop the antibodies if exposed. What should we do if we are exposed to bodily fluids? We should be sure to properly document any exposure incidents, but the first step is making sure that it is in fact an exposure incident. An incident is documentable and a problem when there is a blood-to-blood exposure potential. Some examples are needle puncture, blood splashed in the eyes, or a bite. We need to make sure we have a documentable exposure incident and take the appropriate actions if there is a documentable. For a documentable exposure incident, you should wash or flush the area, seek immediate medical advice or medical care, but as part of that medical care, you should wash and flush the area. The incident itself should be ultimately reported to a principal, but it should be worked through your immediate supervisor. The hepatitis vaccination is good up to 24 hours post-exposure. So if it is an employee-employer exposure incident, you will likely be offered that shot series. In summary, bloodborne pathogens, you should always assume any fluid coming out of the body is potentially infectious to you, that there is a blood in that fluid and that blood has a virus associated with it. Know the location of the PPE that you might use. Know where the gloves are. Know where the disinfectant is if you potentially might use it. If the cleanup kit is not available to you, know that a 1 to 10 bleach solution is effective in cleaning up the virus. Dispose of the waste properly. If anything goes into the regulated waste containers, it should be properly disposed of. If you find the need to put on PPE, you should wash your hands and face after the fact and report all incidents through. If you have any questions regarding the bloodborne pathogen training, you can send them to www.emc-wi.com or call EMC at the posted number, or you can address questions through your immediate supervisor, and those questions will be answered. Hazardous communication. Each employee is required to know any hazardous chemicals that they work with in the workplace and know how to obtain the MSDS sheets associated with those chemicals. The main components of this program are material safety data sheets, as I said, maintaining that library of MSDS sheets for all chemicals in the workplace, and the appropriate chemical labeling of containers. There are some changes with regard to MSDS sheets. There is a new global harmonization system that has been adopted by OSHA. The Department of Safety Professional Services has not adopted this regulation, but the district is implementing these state-of-the-art changes. The new global harmonization system will include standardized signal words, standardized hazard statements, precautionary statements, and the pictograms shown. The changes include a wide variety of chemical testing that is required of chemical manufacturers that use a performance-oriented specification with regard to hazardous classifications. The pictograms are used and signal words are used on the safety data sheets as well as the labeling. Chemical manufacturers are required to report the hazards associated with the chemicals that they're generating. Distributors have to report those hazards as well through the safety data sheets. Some of the changes with regard to the system: food, drugs, articles of clothing, tobacco products are not required to have MSDS sheets, but a nuanced change is non-hazardous chemicals that have an AP seal showing that they are non-toxic are no longer required to have an MSDS sheet on hand. The following standardized pictograms will be used on the SDS sheets as well as chemical labeling: acute toxicity, the skull and crossbones; the carcinogen diamond; corrosives, irritants, thermal sensitizers. The shown pictograms will represent flammables, explosives, oxidizers, and gases under pressure. A new category will also be added showing environmental toxicities, and the signal words will be standardized from least hazard to more hazard, caution, warning, danger. At a minimum, on any container, there should be the product name and the hazards associated with it. Those hazards are spelled out in the signal words, the standard hazard statements, and the pictograms. We also like to see the precautionary measures and first aid, name, address, and phone number of the manufacturer on the labels as well. This is a typical label that shows the name of the chemical, the hazards associated with it, and the remaining information. The SDS sheets will be standardized with these 16 sections that show the name of the chemical and all the hazards associated with it. All the exposure controls, regulatory information, disposal information, ecological information, all identified on the SDS sheets for each and every chemical in the workplace. Specific to the Verona Area School District, we have an MSDS management system that will encompass the new SDS as they come in. The online program is accessible to from the custodial staff, secretary, and also accessible on the public website. The sections are broken down into science, art, and custodial chemicals. All of the district information is stored on the website. All the health and safety information reports are also stored in PDF form on this website, but the MSDS Manager is also maintained on this website, or can be accessed on this website under the icon or button on the left, MS Manager. When you access the MSDS Manager, each MSDS or SDS can be searched by chemical name or manufacturer. It's important not to misspell the word. If you do not hit anything and hit return, all the chemicals for the district will be generated. As shown, the chemicals are categorized by art, science, custodial. Once the search is completed, the MSDS or SDS is shown in a PDF form. This document can be printed or emailed or sent to any appropriate agency person. Some common questions with regard to the global harmonization system is related to the original chemical containers. The manufacturers of these chemicals are required to appropriately label the containers that are shipped out as of December 2015. As those containers come in and as the MSDS sheets or SDS sheets come in, the system will be updated as those documents are generated. Until then, the old containers are grandfathered in or appropriate. There's no need to archive new MSDS sheets as opposed to old MSDS sheets. The compliance dates with regard to DSS adopting the OSHA standard has not been established. Some of the specific issues we have with regard to labeling within the district are large containers that are distributed down to smaller spray bottles and mislabeled or unlabeled. You should not distribute chemicals into smaller containers unless those containers are appropriately labeled. Another common issue with regard to labeling is different chemicals stored in appropriately labeled containers. Here are 3 containers which have a different liquid with the same label. Storage of chemicals and food items together is also not allowed under the hazardous communication. No food or chemicals should be stored together. Also, food containers should not be used to store chemicals. The basics with regard to hazardous communication: you should understand the basics of reading an MSDS sheet or an SDS sheet. Know the locations of your MSDS sheets. Know that there is a website that is available to everybody at all times through the school secretary, through the custodial staff, or through the publicly accessible website that has all the MSDS sheets for the district. If you have a chemical that you work with in your specific workplace, it might be prudent to make a copy of that chemical and certainly know the chemical. You should also not bring in products from home. By virtue of bringing it in from home, we need to have the MSDS sheet on file in the district. Don't transfer products into unlabeled containers or inappropriately labeled containers, and certainly don't attempt a spill cleanup for a product. The Verona Area School District website. Again, the management of the SDS and the MSDS sheets are on a web-based safety program that is accessible through the custodial staff or the school secretary. This is the school district specific website. It has each school, a copy of the floor plan, and the appropriate access buttons. All the health and safety information, projects conducted for the district, individuals responsible for that program are posted and accessible on the website. Bloodborne Pathogen program, the indoor air quality programs, the asbestos awareness, all the health and safety information is contained on the regulatory information can be referenced outside of the website, through the website. Science lab inspections are conducted and stored on the website. The training documentation is all maintained on the district's web. Building specific indoor air quality measurements that have done historically, all contained again on the website. The MSDS Manager can also be accessed from the website. If you have any questions, you can forward the questions to EMC or your immediate supervisor, and we will have answers to all of your questions. New developments in the health and safety field. As of 2009, there is no mercury that can be stored or maintained in a public school. DPI regulation as well as a DNR regulation, dictate that all the mercury in a school district should be properly Some of the common sources of mercury: thermostat switches, blood pressure cuffs, mechanical switches. Some common areas: the science areas, thermometers, elemental mercury, tech ed areas, switches, nurses areas, blood pressure cuffs, boiler rooms, HVAC, univents, mercury switches in those areas. Lead rule. If any paint is to be disturbed or coating surface is to be disturbed in a pre-1978 building that is child occupied, where a child is defined as below 6 years old, lead has to be, the coating has to be tested for lead. If that is lead paint or is a lead containing coating, certified workers have to perform the work. There's notifications to the state, documentation with regard to the work presses. The area needs to be isolated, and generally the dust needs to be controlled and cleaning verified. Shown is a typical example of lead paint. Lead paint was used typically because of its adhesive properties or durability properties. It was used in kitchens, bathrooms, windows, where adhesive properties and durability were an issue. There are serious health effects due to the ingestion of lead paint. It is absorbed by the body in lieu of calcium and poisons the system, poisons the nervous system, and impairs developing ability of children, which is why it's a hazard to children under the age of 6 or expectant mothers. Lead was commonly used more historically as the education or people became aware of lead paint. It was used less, but pre-1940s, 9 out of 10 houses contained lead paint. Between 40 and 1960, 7 out of 10, and between 1960 and 1978. The history of lead paint. Lead paint manufacturers became aware of the harmful effects of lead paint as early as 1950s. In the late 1950s, they began voluntarily reducing the amount of lead in paint. As of 1978, the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned lead in paint to 600 parts per million in residential paint. Lead paint was still used and is still used in some applications, traffic paint, but as a residential or in housing, it has not been used since. Lead is harmful to the body as an inhalation hazard or an ingestion hazard. It is not absorbed, so typically lead paint in good shape, in good condition, that is not disturbed, is not harmful. These are the regulatory standards with regard to lead paint. Federally, chip samples containing 0.5% lead are considered or defined as lead paint. Wisconsin standards are almost 10 times more stringent. Federal standard with regard to XRF, which is an X-ray fluorescence, which is an instantaneous identification method for lead paint. Again, 1.0 milligrams per square centimeter for the XRF. Wisconsin standards are more stringent than the federal. A very small amount of lead paint in a developing child can affect them for a very long time. It's very important that we keep the lead-coated surfaces in good condition and avoid disturbing any lead. Ongoing issues. All heavy objects on movable carts should be secure. The large TVs on movable carts are responsible for quite a few deaths, injuries in schools. Fire evacuation routes and exit postings, tornado evacuation locations should be posted in each classroom and be visible. Electrical safety. Electrical cords should not be used on a permanent basis. Power strips should not be plugged into one another. Daisy chaining is not allowed. Cords may not be placed in areas that may cause slip or trip hazards. Combustible materials may not cover more than 20% of any individual wall surface. and absolutely no combustibles may be hung from the ceiling. Where combustible materials are decorating walls, a potential fire can propagate from one end of a building to another very quickly. Solutions to that: we can frame artwork to put it on the wall, or even laminate. Combustible materials may not be stored within 24 inches of the ceiling or 18 inches around a sprinkler head. No open flame candles are permitted, or open flames, period, in a school are permitted, over and above lab, tech ed, or vocational demonstrations. Any questions will be answered through your immediate supervisor or through the contact information for EMC. Thank you, and have a great school year.